Greetings fellow Temtem tamers, I am Desseus and this video is to list all the types of Temtem found on the airborne archipelago and their relations to one another. In other words, what types they are effective against, ineffective against, resistant to, and what types of techniques or moves they are weak to. Just as a disclaimer, this video only covers the types individually, and not say Temtem with duo types, which would change how those Temtem are treated by various other types, depending on the combination. For this video, I'll be referring and using this chart that I'll now show on screen from Reddit, made and posted by Marodeth. I hope I'm saying that right. Credit goes to them in any case for making such a nice clean design on this chart, clearly displaying the types of Temtem and their relations, but also listing them in alphabetical order. I will put a link in the description of this video below, so you too can also get your hands on this chart so you can use it at your leisure. Starting with the Crystal type, which is effective against mental and electric types, whilst being ineffective against fire and earth types. Crystal is resistant to electric, mental and toxic type techniques. However, it is also weak and vulnerable to melee, fire and earth techniques. Like some other types of Temtem, the Crystal type is still vulnerable to itself. It doesn't have an innate resistance like some other types do, so you have to bear that in mind when you be picking and choosing your fights. Moving on to the Digital type, which stands at being effective against mental, melee and itself, whilst being ineffective against none. The Digital type is resistant to toxic and is weak to water and electric techniques as well as digital techniques. So a type that counters itself, as well as being resisted by none. I imagine this could mean it could trade well against a great many Temtem. It's also worth noting that at the time of this video there is only 2 digital type Temtem, both of the same evolutionary line. I imagine more will be made and added in future updates to the game, as it is still in development, as well as patches after launch, so worth keeping in mind that digital will get more diverse as time goes on. Continuing on to the Earth type, just think ground and rock from Pokemon slammed together, effectively. The Earth type is effective against fire, electric and crystal, ineffective against water, nature, wind, resistant to fire, electric, crystal and toxic, and is weak to water, nature and melee types of attacks. There's plenty to keep in mind when picking up an Earth-type Temtem, including the fact that they are not resistant to their own types of moves, so remember that when fighting other Earth types. Onwards now to the Electric type, which stands at being effective against water, mental, wind and digital types of Temtem, whilst being ineffective against its own type of electric, nature, earth and crystal types. Electric Temtem are of course resistant to electric attacks as well as wind attacks, and weak only to crystal and earth types of attacks. As you can see from this, electric can tick a fair few boxes more than you might have expected in comparison to say Pokemon, where usually you'd only have an electric move on hand. It might actually be worth picking up an electric Temtem. Next up is the Fire type, which behaves in a manner you might have come to expect from other monster capture games, being effective against nature and crystal types, ineffective against water, earth and other fire types, resistant to fire type moves as well as crystal and nature type moves, and is weak to water and earth type moves. Again, nothing really special here. If you've played similar games before, the weaknesses and strengths will make sense. It's just a matter of learning the different versions of Temtem in comparison to other games. Onwards to the Melee type, or fighting if you prefer and stuck in your ways like myself. This type is effective against Earth and Crystal type Temtem. It is also ineffective against its own type, as well as Mental Temtem. Melee Temtem are resistant to other melee moves or techniques, and are weak to mental and digital techniques. Assuming you will not see digital often played for now, you only need to concern yourself with the mental type. Next on the list is the mental type of Temtem, which is basically psychic for those of you coming from Pokemon. Mental moves are effective against normal and melee types, ineffective against crystal, resistant to neutral and melee types again, but is weak to electric, crystal and digital. Moving on now to the nature type of Temtem, which is effective against earth and water, ineffective against fire, toxic and nature, which is self, resistant to water, earth, electric and nature type, and weak to fire and toxic types. Pretty standard here again, mirroring similar weaknesses and strength as they are in other games of the same genre. Next, we have the neutral type. Neutral type techniques are very effective against none, and ineffective against mental type Temtem. Neutral type Temtem are resistant to no types of damage either, and again are weak to the mental type of attacks. So a clear weakness here, and yet with nothing being able to reduce the damage of neutral attacks innately, stab neutral attacks could be worthwhile by picking up a neutral Temtem, and should help you trade against a great many Temtem out there. You just need to be careful of those mental types, as well as any Temtem that can learn mental attacks. Onwards now to the toxic type. Toxic type Temtem are effective against water and nature type Temtem, whilst being ineffective against earth, digital, crystal, and their own type of toxic. Toxic type Temtem are therefore resistant to water, nature, and toxic techniques, however they are weak to the wind type. So only one weakness to worry about, not to mention toxic Temtem will be applying the poison condition to your Temtem. They'll be an irritating fight at the best of times, deadly at the worst. Continuing on to the water type of Temtem. The water types are effective against fire, earth, and digital type Temtem, whilst being ineffective against water, nature, and toxic types. Water type Temtem are resistant to fire, water, and earth type techniques, whilst being weak to nature, electric, and toxic type techniques. Again, very much a standard fare besides toxic and Temtem countering water types, unlike it would in, say, Pokemon with poison. Last but not least, we have the wind type. Wind type Temtem are effective against toxic, however they are ineffective against other wind types and electric types. Wind type Temtem find themselves resistant to wind and earth techniques, whilst being weak to electric techniques. So only one weakness to concern yourself with, but also only countering one type of Temtem. Still, personally I would not write off the wind type, as they have some good hard-hitting attacks that could dish a good amount of damage out against some surprising enemies such as earth type Temtem, who are not resistant to your attacks, and yet you resist theirs. And with that is all the types within Temtem covered in this video. Phew, there was plenty to digest there, wasn't there? What are your thoughts on the types of Temtem? Already have a favourite? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell and all that jazz, and I'll see you next time on the Airborne Archipelago. Take care, guys.